Welcome everybody to number 25 in our series, Light at the End of the Tunnel. My name's Naomi Stead. I'm a professor and head of the Department of Architecture at Monash University, and this series is a collaboration between Monash Architecture and Parlour. We are very fortunate today to be joined by Shaneen Fanton and Belinda Allwood from POD, which is of course a fantastic practice in Cairns, and as it happens, in a moment of good luck and excitingness, they have just been joined by Uncle Peter, who is with them on the screen there. In fact, Justine, if you want to take down the old screen, we'll be able to see Uncle Peter, who is going to say a few words, perhaps in relation to NAIDOC Week. Welcome, Uncle Peter.
Thank you. And hello. We say, Willangata. How are you? Yeah, so I always visit these lot here, Belinda and Janine. Come to here and make myself a nuisance. No, you're not. We're good friends, and so I'm heading off to two schools now. Uncle got to go give a welcoming day and a closing ceremony. But them kids not ready yet for dance, and so I'll see that when I get up there. They reckon, no, they're not ready yet. They're waiting for me to get there. So we're going to have a good time up there today. I'm rushing to get here and got to get to these two schools then. Yeah, I do a lot up here, up the north here, as a traditional owner. Go and help kids in the language and do dancing, you know. So I took these lot around. We went bushwalking and show them all my site where I used to live before, and I guess you know that was hard before, but everything coming true now. That yeah, I'm proud to be here and proud to see you a lot too. Yes, yeah. Right.
Wonderful. Thank you, Uncle Peter.
Thank you, Uncle Peter.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. You're welcome to stay. Although I guess those kids might be waiting for you as well.
Yeah, I think Michael's got a couple.
I'll have a coffee and I'll leave you up to these two now, eh?
Right. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. I should say also that down here, well, at least Monash University is on the lands of the Greater Kulin Nation. And as always, on behalf of Parlour, we acknowledge that the traditional custodians of country across Australia's many nations and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, including Uncle Peter, and to the Indigenous Australians who are part of our Parlour community. As I mentioned, this is the 25th in our series, which Light at the End of the Tunnel, which looks into architecture as a profession, a discipline and a practice, and how it will be affected by the pandemic or continues to be affected. This week, as you know, our guests are Shaneen Fanton and Belinda Allwood, speaking on the subject of the view from Cairns, and also about their practice POD, People-Oriented Design. We'll get Belinda and Shaneen to introduce themselves in a moment, or introduce each other in a moment, but first, as always, some protocols for the session. Please make sure your microphone is on mute, but please, if you're able and if you feel willing, we encourage you to leave your camera on. The format is Q&A. It's meant to be informal but informative. Justine and I ask questions to keep things flowing, but we also take questions from the floor throughout. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and then we'll sort of select and curate questions from the chat and ask you to say it out loud, to put on your camera and your microphone and say it out loud. If you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. Just say in your question and then we'll read it for you. We also encourage you to put your observations and your own observations and experiences into the chat as a kind of commentary. We really enjoy this kind of parallel narrative which emerges during the session, so feel free to do that. And while we might not get to all of the questions, they will help to inform the topics of subsequent sessions, as we've been seeing over the 25 of these that we've done. So I don't know whether I introduced Justine. Justine Clark here, my co-founder of Parlour. Sorry, Justine, that was a glitch. I'm going to throw to you.
Okay, we, as you know, normally I introduce our speakers, but actually we thought at a last minute thing right here, we'd get Shaneen and Belinda to introduce each other. But I'm just going to say briefly, they are the directors of POD in Cairns, which is, I think, a really fantastic practice, and such extraordinary women and supporters of Paola, and actors in the broader architecture and built environment community. They contribute a huge amount, both of them, in many and diverse different ways, and very proud that they're my friends, and I'm very pleased they're here. So Shanine and Belinda, introduce each other for us.
Thank you. Can we go first, or do you want to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Shanine Fanton, extraordinaire. I feel like we're so lucky to have her up here in this community. Shanine and I've been directors of POD since 2014. We formed a partnership back then. And since then, one of our things has been an interest in becoming active voices on multiple stages. Shanine sits on the Urban Design and Places panel, state government panel with the Office of the State Government Architect. She also sits on the First Nations Advisory Working Group as part of AIA National. Shanine was our chair of the FNQ committee of the Queensland chapter of the AIA for many years, and did absolutely amazing things for the community up here. She's very modest, but the work she did up here was fantastic. Really lifted our architectural community, and it included things like Designed in Cairns presentation lecture series, which went over a period of about a year or more, didn't it? Yeah, and running open house and various other initiatives. So very engaged, very engaging, very active. She's awesome.
Thank you, Belinda. Thank you. That was lovely. Now, Belinda Allwood, powerhouse, amazing woman who I met back in 2011 after Cyclone Yasi ripped through Far North Queensland, and we were volunteering for Emergency Architects Australia at the time. Belinda is currently on the Queensland Chapter Council for the Australian Institute of Architects, where she's a councillor, and you're also on the committee, or on the chair of the committee?
No, I'm on the committee
for the Equity, Inclusion and Diversity Committee for the Australian Institute of Architects for Queensland. And I guess that all of these volunteer roles take up quite a bit of time, and so Belinda's very active within the architecture community in Queensland and has initiated all sorts of things, including a talk earlier this week between Kelly Greenop and Carol Gosam and Sarah Lynn Rees about reconciliation, which was really well received in Queensland, and that was a great thing to do for this week. So Belinda has this extraordinary range of skills that not many people know about, that I'm just going to mention briefly. She did architecture the long way through and has many years of experience, but she's also a profoundly good woodworker and furniture maker. She can sail boats. She can do all sorts of things. She used to do martial arts when she was younger, right? So she's sort of this kind of got this incredible range of hidden skills that very few people know about. And then occasionally you're doing something and Belinda will say, well, I can do that, and will whip out an unknown skill. So we're constantly kind of learning about your kind of hidden talents. She also finished her master's in landscape architecture, sorry about our background phone, about 2 years ago now, in which she got the student award and pulled out about 3 other awards through Deakin University, and that fabulous cross-training, as you call it, in landscape architecture has been proven to be extremely beneficial for POD as a practice, and which I'm very grateful that you did. Is there anything else key that I should say that I've forgotten?
I don't think so. I'm kind of, thank you.
That's all right. Before we keep going, I know Uncle Peter was here, but I just want to do a little acknowledgement to say that where POD's office is, and a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment is on Gimoy Wollabara Yidinji country, and we're profoundly thankful to have such great long-term relationships with the Yidinji people, including traditional owners such as Uncle Peter Hyde. And we're very lucky to have those relationships. And this week during NAIDOC week, it's great to see him And I did actually dream last night that I was in the middle of this talk and that he turned up, because he often turns up on Friday at lunchtime to say hello. And so we're all lucky that he's done that today. Thanks to him.
And Uncle Peter was the artist who painted the Bummer Shield that you can see behind us, which is a representation of his country, Girrawonday. It's actually a map. It's art and it's a map.
Wonderful. Thank you both. I think that was
Thank
you.
No, that's all right. I actually just want to also say thank you to Parla, right, for inviting us today. It's really feels very special, and I want to acknowledge that you guys have done it really tough in Melbourne compared to us in Far North Queensland over the last few months. We've been sort of swanning around compared to you guys, and I'm really pleased that you're now able to travel, you know, and see friends and have cups of coffee outside of your house.
We'll turn up on your farm soon, Shanine, don't worry.
Good. You're welcome, all of you.
Cool. All right. Well, I think the introduction that you both gave of each other, and also the just acknowledgement of the traditional owners who you work with so closely, is a really good sort of introduction for our first question, which is really, I'm kind of interested, I'd just like to know a bit more, or you'd have you explained a bit more about POD and about how that works as a practice, because I know you talk about it as a kind of hybrid and multidisciplinary practice. And often when we think of multidisciplinary practices, we think of that as giant engineering firms that have gobbled up architects and, you know, the those huge things. And, you know, your practice is a rather smaller practice. And so I'm interested in what multidisciplinary means in the context of small practice. And I think you've kind of also already alluded a lot to what that means, just in the kind of broad range of disciplines that you each bring to that practice. And I know, Shanine, a long time ago you told me that you thought the only practices that were doing well in Cairns at the time were those that had a kind of hybrid offer or a hybrid model. And I'm just wondering if you might talk a little bit more about what this model is, or how it's developed, and what that kind of means for the sorts of work you do and how you position the practice.
Okay. Sure. So from my perspective, so for everyone else listening, POD advertises as undertaking architecture, landscape architecture, project management, community engagement, research and teaching. And from my perspective, because I've had a bit of a career that's been in a few different places, I get a bit bored with straight architecture, frankly, you know, because the detail of gruelingly creating buildings can send anyone to an early grave. I've got contract admin happening at the moment. I needed a bit of diversity. So the best way to have that is to create it for yourself, really. So I think for us, because we have multiple skill sets, because I did a PhD in architecture and anthropology and also did a diploma of project management and worked for Arup for a little bit in that space, that I want to be able to use all of those skills. And because I'd done a lot of community engagement kind of work on country with people, I wanted to be able to use those skills. And I also knew that some of those skills were probably more lucrative than straight architecture. And so that was really my initial interest in the diversification.
I think, can I? Yeah. I think also, I mean, we started working together in 2011 and formalised it in 2014. But in talking about how we might form a practice in Cairns, it was still GFC, post GFC, and the economy was still pretty depressed up here. So it was strategic in that we knew we had to be agile and flexible, and by providing a diversity of services, it would help ensure our survival. Or
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
and that certainly has ended up being the case to the point where we've diversified even further with landscape along the way.
Yeah, you kind of can't. I mean, back in the 90s, there used to be practices in Cairns which were big practices that were specialist practices. and they then shut when the GFC hit. And many of those directors then went on to work for others or start their own practices. And it feels, Cairns, the region that we're working in is not really big enough for people, I don't think, to have one thing that they just do. There might be something that you're particularly good at, but you still do a whole lot of other things as well, because if you just do one thing, there's just not enough of that one thing to sustain you for years and years and years, even if it is schools or aged care.
Would you say, Shanine, well, and Belinda, that I mean, that's not specific to Cairns, right? That would be true of any regional location, or is it particular to Cairns?
I think it would be true of any regional location. It's just the size of the pond, really. And so, and we were talking in the context of project sectors, types of work, but I think it's also a location thing. I was observing the other day that if we relied on work in Cairns for our survival, we wouldn't survive. Most of our work is, in fact, outside of Cairns. It's beyond, in our region and beyond, throughout Cape York, Western Queensland, all the way down to Brisbane, and we've done work in the Pacific. And at any given point in time over the last 6 years, I think the amount of projects that we've had in Cairns itself has been quite minimal. It's probably about 25% or less sometimes.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I guess we're known for our working on the ground with people, and particularly with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but you could say if we had a specialism, it's about regional and remote work and knowing how to do that work, because it does come with its own set of different conditions and different challenges. So whether it's in the Torres Strait or Mount Isa or, you know, southwest Queensland. A bit like,
Sorry, no, you go.
No, I was just going to say, a bit like, you know, inner urban conditions in Melbourne come with their own set of conditions, which I'm completely unfamiliar with, by the way.
You know a good cafe when you see one. So how did you get started? How did the practice start?
You can go, John.
I was employed by another firm in town. Shanine was working for the state government department in town. We both, in the wake of Cyclone Yassi, signed up for to join Emergency Architects Australia to help with some of the cyclone damage. Just going down, assessing, helping people get started, telling them what the choices are. We had fun. We really enjoyed working together and recognised that we had quite different skill sets, but we were having fun. We enjoyed working together, and then. The Synapse.
Synapse came along. So I was working for DATSIP as the Queensland Program Manager for Indigenous Home Ownership, trying to implement 99-year leasing in remote communities, which has got all sorts of problems with it. But we got the first one across the line, as well as a cluster of others. Anyway, I ran into Gudja Gudja 4 Mile, who the Fantons and the 4 Miles have known each other for a long time, and we all went to the same regional state high school. And he was living down the road from me at the time, and I just come back from the NT, and I thought, oh, I probably need to get to know my TOs. I don't really know my Cairns TOs very well. And so we started hanging out with together with he and his partner, and they'd started agriculture. And so it was through that friendship that the Synapse project came about, in the sense that Synapse approached agriculture about the project, and they were looking for an architect, and so they approached me. And of course I was working full-time somewhere else, so I had to build a bit of a team. And so I said, Belinda, can you help me with this? And I also said to Fran and Andrew Lane, can we work on this together? And so pretty much everyone was working full-time somewhere else, and we did Synapse at night, you know, and on Saturday.
Tell us about Synapse, which I've had the privilege of visiting, but I suspect most of our audience hasn't.
Yeah, okay. So it's supported accommodation facility in Cairns for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with acquired brain injury. Synapse is the name of the not-for-profit organisation, previously Acquired Brain Injury, Institute of Queensland, it's not Institute, Acquired Brain Injury Organisation of Queensland. So they're the host organisation. It's basically 8 units in duplex format and a central facility, but designed in a very non-institutional way, with a lot of Indigenous traditional owner involvement in the design process and Indigenous consultant team led by an Indigenous client who's Jennifer Cullen, who's the CEO of Synapse, to provide an alternative type of care for people with complex disabilities. So from Synapse's perspective, there's no other facility, or wasn't at the time when it was completed in Australia, like it. And they call it their community living initiative. Did you want to say anything more about?
Yeah, I was just reflecting back on the journey at the time. Synapse had some supported accommodation in Brisbane, which was operating as share houses in suburban settings, and they had an interest in developing a different model of care, and particularly for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with acquired brain injury. So for us, it wasn't just about developing the architecture, it was working with them to develop the model of care. They kind of grew side by side, and to the point where even now with the facility on the ground, it's enabled them to develop their model of care beyond the design. So if we went and did another facility now, there would be some things that would be different again.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, we're going there after lunch because they've got their NAIDOC celebrations on today, and we go every year and go and hang out with the residents and the staff and everyone who's there, and have a nice afternoon. So
I think, well, what came after it was finished and was started to be used, it got residents. Griffith Uni did a post-occupancy evaluation of it and picked up some really interesting things, didn't they? Did you want to talk about it?
Well, probably some of the key, I know we've got to talk about other things, so some of the key points were, so a lot of the people who were living in the facility had come from either the mental health unit in Cairns and had been there for many years, were inappropriately placed in aged care facilities. So there's a young woman who's in her 20s who'd been in an aged care facility because there's nowhere for people to be, and they were all heavily under medical controls. So although they had brain injuries, they were so doped up that they weren't able to kind of improve their situation because of that. So one of the things that's happened since the new model of care and Synapse has implemented its way of living is that all the people have come off their medical controls, and so they're able to actually work on their brain plasticity and their independence. And it's kind of extraordinary because the people who live there now have lives. They catch the bus into town, they go and do stuff, they go and do activities, they have family and friends visiting, they have enough outdoor space and a yarning circle and a kind of barbecue pit and places to gather as a community and as a family, and for other people to come in and do work with them. And so it's changed the lives of those people.
They've got control over their own circumstances, and they've got a community.
Yeah, whereas before they were just really in a facility.
Institutionalised.
Yeah, yeah. So, the good news is we're hoping to work on, we're still in that SDA space, or working on other projects of complex disability and in and around Indigenous needs.
And homelessness.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, that's all right. We go this afternoon and see the residents, and they remember us, and we sit down and have a yarn,
I think that's one of the other things that strikes me about, I suppose, what I know about your practice is just how embedded you are in a range of communities, and the you take kind of co-design processes very, very seriously. I think a lot more that, and I mean, in the name of your practice, people-oriented design, I know that's really kind of a lot of what drives you, but it's not, I started off asking about this sort of hybrid model of practice, but again, that kind of degree to which you're embedded is again, not a kind of typical architectural model where often you finish a project and you move on to the next one. And obviously some people maintain great relationships with previous clients, but it just strikes me that you have worked quite consciously to be, to kind of be very embedded in the communities that you work with. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think, Belinda, and I would definitely agree, because we talk about this a lot. To work effectively with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the long term, those relationships have to be about trust and longevity and respect, and they can't be the short view. So the reason why Uncle Peter comes in here every Friday is because we're friends and he likes hanging out with us, you know, and we're just lucky that that's the case. The first time we met him a number of years ago at a Lunar Land Trust meeting, he growled us because we were two non-Indigenous women trying to talk to them about a master plan, and he said, "Why are you here?" You know. And so once you get kind of past, I don't know, and we all live in a small town together. Cairns is 140,000 people, and it's just really important to get along, because that's how you get outcomes.
I think the other thing that ties into from experience is working regionally. Quite often the budgets are less on projects, and you have to be really smart with what you're doing to ensure outcomes. So for us, the focus really is on process and relationships, and making sure the outcomes are really clearly established and embedded in the whole process throughout.
Yeah, but you can't get the outcomes unless you've got a team of people who are on your team working together to the same end, you know. So
what do you do when you are growled, and how do you get that trust in that first instance?
Well, Shanine's just so experienced in this area. I remember going, I know the meeting she's talking about. Before we went into the meeting, she said, "We're going to get growled. This is going to happen." And it did. She was right. So we were ready for it. And we understand the context it comes from, and it's valid. It's a valid question. So in that circumstance, we had been invited there by one of the other TOs, an elder who was chair or CEO of the trust at the time, and we didn't have to say anything. This other elder spoke for us and said, "This is who they are. I've worked for them. They're doing this job. It's all okay."
yeah. What do you do? Look, you apologise, you acknowledge, you know, part of this whole discussion around truth telling is absolutely critical. So part of it is being absolutely straight about where you are and what your circumstances are, because smoke and mirrors don't work, right? Because people have seen it coming for years, and you cannot bluff people. So from my perspective, I just go in as absolutely honestly and say, so I had another meeting a couple of years ago with a different neighbouring clan group who know that I have a relationship with the Yidinji, but were still interested. And I got invited to a meeting of theirs, and I'm in a circle of 15 people on a site, and I've been dragged in by a separate consultant, and I can see the other team looking at me going, "What's she doing here?" And so I had to say, "Look, blah, blah has invited me to this meeting. You know who I am, and you know the other projects I've done for the other mob." I said, "If you don't want me to be here, that's fine, I'll leave. You just have to yell out if you're comfortable or not. But you don't have to have me here if you don't want me here. I'm here in my objective capacity as an architect to provide advice if you'd like it." And so there was a pause in the meeting, and then people had a small discussion, and they came back, and the person who was leading the meeting said, "No, it's okay, you can stay. We know who you are." So I feel like often in those circumstances, I actually have to be a bit forthright and upfront and say, "If you're not comfortable with us being here, just say so and we'll step back." And that's absolutely fine. So it's about giving permission. For me, people, I don't know, it's about sort of saying, "It's all right, just tell us what you want us to do," you know. Is that oversharing?
No, I think it's really important, and it's diving deeper than I did into that conversation, which is, a very important point.
No, I think I think it's incredibly helpful. I think so many of us don't have those experiences, and so I think it's incredibly helpful to know how to proceed. We've got a question from Alicia. Alicia, do you want to put your question to
Yeah, thanks everyone. I was just thinking it sounds very similar to what happens in Tasmania as well, and regional Tasmania and Hobart even. You know, everybody knows your business, but in some ways that helps because it means that you're known and connected to the community. And I guess I was wondering if you've got any thoughts about whether this is just particular to working in a smaller regional community, or whether, well, I guess there's two parts of the question, whether it's possible to have this kind of connection to community in a larger context with the diverse practice model that you've got, and similarly, or is it still possible to have that level of community connection in a regional city with a more traditional practice model?
There's two very different questions.
Very different.
The first one, can we have that sort of connection or build those relationships if we're working in a bigger city? Yes, because we do it on projects away from Cairns on a regular basis, and we're working with Aboriginal corporations currently in the southeast, where we've done what we do, which is spend time building relationships with people and establishing whether everybody is happy to work together and take it further.
Yeah, the second part of the question is a bit trickier. I think you touched on a point before which is really important, or which is unsaid, which is about reputation, Alyssa. So any step, in a small community, any step you make slightly in the wrong direction or perceived as the wrong direction, everybody knows about it. So in some ways you have to be, people know you and they kind of know your family and they know your generational history. So they have an expectation of what you might be like from that, which is slightly weird, right? But that's how kind of kinship and long histories work in places. But you have to be kind of transparent about who you are, right? And if you also make a mistake, then people know about it very quickly. So you have to decide how you're going to manage your reputation and how to handle that if you make a mistake. And so I don't know, I imagine in a larger city, there's there could be, depends if you've been there for a long time, but there could be anonymity in that, in the ability that people don't know you so well, or where you're from, what you've done. The question about connections, though, I agree with Belinda. I think even if Pod was in Brisbane or Melbourne or Sydney, we would still have a diversity of base because we like working with different kinds of people and on different kinds of projects. I don't know if it would be exactly the same hybrid mix, but we would probably aim and be interested in maintaining that kind of diversity, because I get bored if I just have work on one thing.
Naomi, can we go to Karen? Karen, you've got a question which I think is very good and runs to the one that was going through my head, which is how do you structure your fees, given that you are a business, to enable this kind of relationship building? Karen, do you want to put your probably much more sophisticated question?
No, that was my question. Hi, Shanine. Hi, Belinda.
Hello. How are you?
Good. I think part of the challenge in a way, this notion of relationships and this issue around traditional practice is that architects are engaged on a project-based procurement model. So you win a project and then the project finishes and that's that. So I guess I was curious if you were engaged under different terms and which would allow then for the kind of typical gaps between projects to be filled with the ability to stay connected into both kind of communities and people.
The short answer is not really, Kieran. So, but what I can say is that we work pretty hard to maintain the client relationships as well as the community relationships. So, unless you can think of another example, Belinda, look, we probably do way too much pro bono work for everyone, in all sorts. It's not as though we do lots and lots of it, but we work hard to maintain relationships. So if someone rings up who we haven't worked for 2 years and asks for a bit of advice on something, of course we'll spend time doing that. But I think most architects would. But the work is project-based.
It is, and look, yeah, we acknowledge the standard client architect agreement is quite rigid, and it's based on a traditional method with certain assumptions, and there's, you know, maybe half of our projects we can use it as it was intended. Many other projects we kind of just use other services or use pre-designed services for big chunks of work that we know we need to do up front before it turns into a more traditional workflow. So we might end up having a couple of different agreements on a project as it's this, you know, as it's kind of taking formation.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it strikes me that there's an opportunity around, like, in a practice, there's typically a budget that says we're going to spend X percentage or X percentage of time bidding for work or answering EOIs or, you know, whatever, RFTs and things. And you could say, and, you know, take a different view and say, we're going to take that money and just spend it on other things. You know, we're going to take that time allocation and deal with it differently. Because, you know, architects aren't very good at kind of developing trusted advisory relationships that mean you end up in a continuing contractual relationship with a client or a community. It's much more ad hoc. But you could kind of think about it differently and then just, yeah. So I think it's interesting because it is one of the biggest challenges that most people ask us about. How do you maintain relationships if you're just getting a job and then you have to finish, you know? So it's just...
Yeah, and look, if you're talking about just the job too, it's and you just touched on it. It's about method. We work on our method on a project by project basis, and then that informs our resourcing and how we would build the fees for it. We would often go back at the end of all that and just do a cross check as a percentage by stage. But we know on that particular type of project, we need to invest in the method, which means including what we need to for engagement and for those kind of circular processes that happen within stages.
I was just thinking about that, Kieran. Probably one of the things that we do that I haven't really ever thought about in a quantifiable way is that we end up doing sometimes with clients, whether they're government or not government, kind of side projects that aren't architecture with them. So for example, we might be doing some work for a land trust, but then you might end up helping them, I don't know, give a talk on something somewhere else or organise something. So we end up sort of doing a bit of often community-based work for our client that may not be, that we're not charging for necessarily, but is about the ongoing relationship. I mean, obviously we're more likely to do this for people that we like and we're getting along with and we have, you know, a long-term alignment with them, people who are, you know, all architects have clients who are less an ideal fit and more of an ideal fit. But certainly the ones that we have a good fit with, we often end up doing things that are outside of the office with, if that makes sense, in the strict form of architecture. Yeah. So whether it's organising a festival or whether it's helping with a presentation or something, or, you know. But I wish I had a sweet spot answer for the passive income kind of question, which I feel a bit that was, Kieran. I'm still looking for it.
Well, we've got Kieran on next week, so we might talk about that more then, Kieran. I think.
Yeah, good. We'll watch. I can learn something.
Certainly that's one of the reasons you're there next week. Naomi, I feel like I'm taking over the questions. Do you want to?
No, that's okay. Well, actually, I wanted to ask a question. Can I just be a punter and ask a question? So, Shanine, you and I met 1,000 years ago when we were doing our PhDs at the same time at the University of Queensland. And over the years, of course, I've, you know, watched you in your practice, and I've always wondered how, you know, both specifically and generally, your PhD studies have influenced your practice. How have you used that work?
Yeah, okay. It's a good question. We talk about this a bit too. So I'm a great advocate for postgraduate study. All of you there, if there are people who are wondering whether to do it or not, you should take the leap, because postgraduate study will teach you things about problem solving and about yourself that you may not always know already. And Belinda knows this, don't you, from doing your Masters of Landscape. So, so in the process of doing the PhD, there was all sorts of, you know, I learned things about culture and people and Indigenous Australian history, and I often take for granted the level of probably embedded knowledge I've got in the back of my brain, and I wonder why the world is still the way it is and why we're not doing what we you know, what I think most people should be doing. So there's an embedded layer of knowledge around kinship and anthropological history in Australia and colonial history in Australia and linguistics and all sorts of things that I have and that I apply. And there's also learnings around just working with people and, you know, things I was taught basically in Arnhem Land back in the late 90s about how to work with people in what was considered then for the Yolngu people the right way to do the work that I apply. The other, so that's the kind of socio-cultural stuff. And a lot of that obviously has come through learnings through Professor Paul Memmott, who I still have a working relationship with, and he and I are still working together today on current projects. The other bit is about how to take large amounts of data and information and to analyse it and process it and distill it and find in it what's important. And I think all of those things contribute to practice and writing reports and organising time and organising projects. You've done a master's. Do you want to comment on that? Sort of
No, I'm just,
yeah.
I don't think I've got anything to add to that.
No, so that's what I think it's contributed in many, many different ways, Naomi.
I think I
Yeah.
do have something to add.
Yeah,
Actually. I think it's the ongoing relationship that you've maintained with those institutions or UQ that then allows us to, well, you in particular, to engage in ongoing research and teaching also. So in the last few years, Shanine's led a master's studio for UQ architecture students called the Social Outreach Studio, which has been working with traditional owners on country with a group of students. And that's been incredibly enriching, I think, for us as a practice.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, well, that was spearheaded by Kelly Greenups, the Social Outreach Studio, and hopefully it will come back in line next year when we get a vaccine and people can move around more and stuff. But certainly, you're right, that connection is really important, and it's the ongoing sort of scholarship or academic connection as well that's really valuable.
That also was a platform to enable you to share that level of knowledge too.
Yeah.
And I wasn't as deeply involved in it, but I was certainly very aware that in those studio classes there were many students that had those real aha moments and were deeply moved by what they learned. So that sort of profound experience, I think, is just priceless.
Yeah, yeah. And we're lucky enough to have Ro Fullerton working for us now, who was in the SOS. So from a practice development perspective, it's fantastic to have students who've done that work and then come and work for you. So they've got a little bit of embedded knowledge, so you don't have to retrain or train people up more, you know.
Well, maybe, in fact, that might lead to another question, which kind of links between that point you just made and the earlier conversation about the small community and regional locations. I mean, let's imagine that somebody is presently located in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane, and they're thinking of moving to Cairns or some other regional location, and they're coming in as a complete stranger. I mean, is that what, you know, would you advise that people do that, or what? How would you say they should manage themselves as an architect?
You had a great answer. You start on this one.
Oh, I said now. Terrible. Yeah. Look, regional practice offers a lot of opportunities. It's a completely different way of practicing. I think for people in cities to consider practicing regionally, yes, it does take time to build those connections. I think we had a great conversation with both Ro and Angela, who've come to us in the last couple of months here yesterday about that, because Rona came to us from Sunshine Coast and Angela's come to us from a big engineering practice in Brisbane, who we've worked before with on another project down there. It's nice, it's kind of these layers of connection that kind of turn around, which are beautiful things. What did Rose say about working?
She said that the diversity you get in regional areas is so broad compared to what you would get in a city. So it is a bit like being thrown in, not the deep end, but you get to work on all sorts of projects, you know, and you're not just stuck working on a $30 million thing in the back corner. As someone with a couple of years experience, you're running projects, you're working on a great diversity projects. You're also having to understand how the region that you're in, whether it's Tasmania or Far North Queensland, is different from where you've come from. So different socially, different climatically, different geographically,
Different construction methodology.
yeah, different suppliers, different relationships, different politics, and they find all of that stuff really fascinating. So, Ellen said this when she first came to work from Pod after being at 6 Degrees for 6 years in Melbourne. She said, and look, this isn't meant to sound in any way offensive, Melbourneites, but she said practicing in Melbourne was a bit like practicing in a bubble where everyone reflected back at you what you wanted to kind of hear and learn. And, you know, everyone was working together to create the most amazing things. She said, but when she came to Queensland, a lot of people she met didn't agree with anything that she said, and that was a bit confronting. But I think that's the thing about regional areas. There's also this, you know, not many people think the way Pod thinks, really, and so every day you're having to convince other humans that perhaps there's a different way of looking at the world.
Yeah,
you know?
different ideology, different politics we have to contend with, but still maintain reputation in a small town.
Yeah.
With. So if we protest about something, it's on the front page of the paper. And everybody knows about it.
I mean, the good things are you don't pay as much for parking. You're within half an hour of freshwater hole in the middle of the rainforest, right? You don't need a massive wardrobe because it's pretty warm all of the time, you know. Apparently the rent is not that cheap, I've been told by the girls quite recently. And you get to work on all sorts of interesting things, and you get to travel because you have to travel to get to the places where you might do the work, you know.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time in very small planes quite often to get to very remote areas. So there's a lot of variety and a lot of opportunity. I think everybody that's worked with us, you mentioned being thrown in the deep end before, but gets a lot of rope to play with and can learn as fast as they want and get exposure to, I guess if you're a graduate looking to register, to get work experience in a regional city, you're going to get much broader exposure to all of the parts of being an architect in a much shorter time frame, generally speaking, from our experience and observations.
So can I ask a bit about Cairns? I know we've had this conversation before that there are a very high proportion of women in the profession in Cairns. Shaneen every now and then sends me numbers going, is this the highest proportion in the country? When I go, and I still, and she goes, well, the numbers are quite small. But yeah, there are, and you know, you've talked about this before about why that might be. You've sort of speculated. I wondered if you might want to speculate for us today on.
Sure. Well, we don't know for sure, but we've got some ideas about it. So I think when we did that analysis a few years ago, it was about 23% of women practices in Cairns, or female practicing architects. I think there's 55 to 60 registered architects in Cairns. It's a very over-serviced region because everyone comes here and it's lovely and wants to stay. So I was thinking about this. I think there are a few people who are from here and went to uni in Brisbane and have come back and built practices, and I'm kind of one of those people. Before us, there was Deb Fisher, who's still around, and she was a kind of role model for us, you know, when we were starting out. And in fact, you worked for, and Gail Plunkett, yeah, was here as well. There were a number of those practices in the 90s that were the Woodheads or the Suitors and the others who had larger offices where there were, who had senior women in them. When the GFC hit, they closed their office, but the women stayed and they started their own practices. And certainly Coburn Architecture is that. And
A number of women started their own practices. Some of them are still sole traders and they're doing very well. But that GFC was, while economically it was very hard for everybody, it was like a big opportunity to change the landscape of architecture practice in Cairns. And there's been a lot more women who've entered practice themselves for that. We're an example of that, and there are many others as well. some who we collaborate with on projects.
Yeah.
It's lovely. We've got a nice network, and it's nice having those women close.
Yeah.
Something that came up in that event I did with you guys years ago was the sort of someone had an idea that the people who end up in Cairns have a sense of adventure.
Yes.
And that, do you want to talk about that?
Oh, look, I think whether it's here or Broome or, the bottom of Tasmania, we use those extremes, or many of the people who live in Cairns like to do activities outdoors, kayaking, mountain bike riding, bushwalking. Those are key kind of tourist activities in Cairns. Or they want a green change, they want to live off the grid, in a permaculture kind of hippie community somewhere on the Atherton Tablelands. It's definitely a place where people, sorry, Uncle Peter's just coming past. Did you want to quickly say goodbye?
Okay.
Yeah.
I say culling. Culling mean I'm going.
Thank you for joining us.
Right.
Good luck with your dancing.
Them kids are ringing up for me. Hurry up, I've got to hurry up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Uncle.
Colin.
I'll see you up there.
Yeah, okay, you will. All right.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so I think if you don't have, I think, look, there's some risk in starting your own practice or moving to a regional area. So if you've grown up in a highly urbanised environment, and look, up here, the public transport is terrible. The cultural aspect is not too bad, depending on what you're looking for, but it'd be nothing compared to Melbourne, So if you're waiting around waiting for a good band to turn up, you might, be waiting a long time. So you weigh up those kind of aspects against the other pros, which are to do with the natural environment, and to do with the slightly more relaxed pace, I would say. So I'd say there is more outdoor adventure, definitely. And I know most of the women who are up here practicing are into some of that stuff.
The other thing that I've been aware of for years is, while we're kind of the end of the road, end of the line up here in Cairns, in some ways we feel like we're the centre of the world because of our proximity to Asia. And from our design perspective, being in the wet tropics, we have a lot of connection with what's happening in Southeast Asia, and it's not far to travel there. So we don't feel like we're on the edge. We quite often feel like we're in the centre of things. Yeah.
And can I ask how things have gone with the pandemic? I know you guys have been busy hiring people left, right and centre, so your practice appears to be growing. How's the pandemic affecting?
Yeah, look, we had the earlier period of lockdown and limited travel in the first kind of March through to the middle of the year, and then things started to lift. We feel like we've been very fortunate up here, observing what's been happening in Victoria particularly and overseas. Things essentially, it feels a bit two-speed. To us, it feels on a daily basis like things are almost back to normal in terms of where we can move, how we move, how many people.
Close together we can sit.
Yeah, like that. We've been reflecting on how your memory shifts of things when it's not been that long. So we're feeling pretty good up here currently.
Yeah, and look, we've been very stimulated by Home Builder, whether I like it or not, and also stimulated by the state government in Queensland, who have gone all out across all departments to, well, here you go, because we are a small to medium-sized practice and we don't chase $30 million projects generally because all the state government stuff that they've released has all been, less than $3 million. They're doing these small projects, lots of small projects everywhere to give everyone a boost in the construction industry. And because we fit into that sort of zone of they do lots of projects that are less than $5 million, then we've been inundated with tender opportunities. So as a result of our sort of scale, it's fitted in well with what the Queensland government stimulus packages have been trying to do. And I think that's just lucky, you know.
Having said that, middle of the year, we didn't know what the end of the year was going to look like in terms of pipeline of work. So there was that kind of moment of fears, like what's going to happen. But that fortunately shifted turned around. Yeah.
And frankly, you know, in architecture, it's hard to see through more than 3 months ahead. So come March, there's still, you know, it's like, well, is the economy really going to start slowing down and the states are going to run out of money, you know, at some point? When is the trickle feed of projects actually going to stop? And are we all going to be in a lot more trouble than we are at the moment? So it's not, we're not resting on our laurels, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm in my designated role as timekeeper, I'm aware that we have 3 minutes remaining. Yeah, so in closing, I wonder, is there anything that you would like to say to a kind of Parlour audience that you haven't said yet, Belinda or Shanine?
We were reflecting yesterday just on the title of your webinar series, Light at the End of the Tunnel, and what that might mean and who your audience might be. And I did a little interview with Imagine not so long ago, and Shanine did one with Sarah Lebner, first Archie job, about things like, okay, it might be tough now. We've been through recessions before, we've been through a GFC. You come out of it, it's about keeping hope, it's about cross-training. If you can't find work, and I know there's many graduates who are in the same boat now who are finding it difficult to find work, and some subsets of graduates too, whether it be international students facing difficulty. I would just encourage them to not give up hope, but to look for opportunities in cross-training. Shanine mentioned earlier that I took the long way. I went to QUT back in the late 80s. I didn't get registered till 2010, but in the years between, I did some very, very different things that were unrelated to architecture entirely, but the skills that I gained from it have helped us in business. So I would say, look for opportunities to cross-train, whether it's in directly aligned things with architecture, or things that may help you in business, and also things like recognise what your superpowers are, recognise what your weaknesses are, and work on your weaknesses so they don't hold you back.
The other thing is, I've got teenage kids, and we've also got kind of millennials in the office. I'm a bit blunt sometimes. I feel like, I know we're just in the middle of pandemic, but I feel like the world is full of risk aversion. Everything is about risk. No one actually just does stuff much anymore. And I would encourage any of you as younger people who are worried about your future and worried about making the wrong decision, or worried about anything to do with your work, that sometimes it's okay just to have a crack at something and just to do stuff and to see what happens. Because as long as you're kind of upright and you've got a roof over your head and some clothes on your back and a way to get 3 meals a day, you'll in principle be okay. You just have to get through the next immediate bit that's in front of you. But I feel like the world sometimes goes into a stasis, looking into its own navel, worrying about what might happen next, when you can't control any of that. What you can control is what's immediately in front of you. And if you have a go at something, then at least you get a diversity of experience. It's like when you leave the house and walk the different way around the block, you have a change of view, and sometimes you need a bit of that if you feel a bit stuck, you know.
Fantastic advice and comments from both of you. Thank you so much. And it's been really fantastic having you both on here, such generous and insightful and fantastically diplomatic, but also extremely fun people. So thank you very much. Shall we have our virtual round of applause, which we often do?
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
And Monash. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. And I have to say, as you were saying, just have a go. I was thinking of this whole series with Naomi and me going, well, let's just have a go and see if we can run some online events. And here we are 25 sessions later. So that was quite a successful have a go. So yes, I completely agree with that as a strategy for life, really. As I said, in the middle of next week, we've got Kieran Wong joining us, talking about, kind of various ways one might practice. And he may or may not be joined by someone else. I'm still working that out. But either way, it will be a really great session.
I'll be driving a furniture truck down south, so I'm going to pull over on the side of the road to do it. Is that okay?
It's very Kieran.
Sorry.
Wearing that great orange vest as well. Okay.
Can we say thank you to Paula? Thank goodness that you did do light at the end of the tunnel, because I know so many people that are thankful that you have done it. And, talking about different ways to practice, you guys have completely reinvented, I think, how most Zooms I hop on is one person talking and everyone else's cameras are off and you have no idea what's going on, I think the fact that you're a camera on, institution is great. I really like it. So thank you for that.
Cool. Yes, no, it's been fantastic. And I think as someone said in the comments, the opportunity to bring people together from across the country and even across the world is really fabulous. And I think as we go back to face-to-face events, we will still continue to do these online sessions, because I think the potential for that engagement across geography is really wonderful.
Yeah, the reach is fantastic.
Yeah, for us in the region, because we can't turn up.
Yes, and I'm back in my Bright New project excitement phase, and I've got a bazillion ideas. So some of them might see the light of day. Anyway.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week with Kieran.